Today I face off short-term rentals versus traditional rentals, the pros, the cons, in today's quick investing tip. Hi there, Ryan Black, real estate investor and lifestyle architect. In today's quick investing tip, I want to talk about short-term rentals and traditional rentals and do a little bit of a comparison between the two. Now, first, maybe I should define it. Traditional rentals is what most people think of when you think of rental properties. Could be a single family, multifamily, doesn't matter, that you simply tenant for a long-term period of time, typically a 1-year minimum lease. Could be 6 months, but usually 1 to 2 years on a long-term lease. The same tenant is there every month, and that's that, right? Traditional rentals. Short-term rentals is more a nightly rental. Could be by the night, could be by the week. Think of like a hotel. A hotel is a short-term rental, but in the context of single-family homes or even a multifamily building that does short-term rentals. Airbnb, VRBO, there are different platforms out there or marketplaces that people use in order to promote their short-term rentals. And so you may be familiar with some of those. But that's what we're talking about. Short-term rentals versus traditional rentals. Now, pros and cons, I'm going to kind of just throw out a bunch of different ideas for you to kind of think about because, you'll determine whether you think one is better than the other. My opinion is, I'll wait. I'll tell you at the end on my opinion. So when we look at rents, obviously money coming in, the advantage of traditional rentals is that assuming you have vetted your tenants correctly, you've got guaranteed rent. You're good. You know, okay, for the next 12 months, for the next 18, 24 months, I'm going to have, $1,800, $2,800, $2,500, whatever it is, coming in every single month for that unit. So you have guaranteed income. That's really, really a good thing, right? Because you know you have a long term. Now, when you look at the short-term rentals, you don't know. Are you going to be booking it? What's your book rate? Are you going to be 80% occupied, 90% occupied, 40% occupied, right? So you might have a lot of nights where your unit is not generating any income. So that's a disadvantage. But on the flip side, the short-term rentals, when done correctly, if you get it in the right location and you do everything, and there's a ton of details, but you get everything done correctly, well, you actually have much higher income potential with a short-term rental. If you do things right, let's say for example, you have a unit and you're $1,500 a month as a traditional rental is what you'd bring in. If you're running the short-term rental correctly, you should be bringing in twice that. So you should be bringing in $3,000 a month as a short-term rental versus $1,500 as a traditional rental. So your income potential is much, much higher, but there's also that risk as well, if you don't do it right, that it sits vacant. So next up, with the traditional rentals, usually you don't have to furnish them. There are some exceptions, but typically you never furnish a rental. It's simply unfurnished, and then whoever the tenant is, they bring in their own furniture and all that stuff. You'll have obviously appliances that are there, right? Certain appliances in the kitchen, but as far as furniture, none of that. Every tenant brings their own stuff and takes it when they leave. So that's a good advantage with traditionals. Whereas with a short-term rental, obviously it needs to be fully furnished, and not just furnished, it needs to look nice. It needs to be well designed, well laid out, because if it's not, well, it's not going to create a very pleasant experience for your guest. So that's the upside, is you don't have to furnish a short-term rental. But you know what? On the short-term rentals, you don't even have to own them. That's a big thing. You don't even have to own the property. You can rent and then sublease, if you know how to do it and you do it correctly and legally, you can sublease property that you don't even own. And if you're paying, using the same numbers, $1,500 a month, and then you're turning around and making $3,000 a month, you just made yourself $1,500 a month without even having to own the property. So that is an option, is a strategy. Very, very lucrative if done correctly. It is what it is. Now, with the traditional rentals, there are usually less restrictions as far as being able to run it as a rental. There are exceptions. I love how everything I say, there are exceptions. There are exceptions because anytime you have certain types of, let's say a condominium, condominium complex or something, usually the HOA will have a limit to the number of units that can be non-owner occupied. So let's say you've got a community with, 250 condos. And so they may say no more than 10% of the condos can be non-owner occupied. Otherwise, it goes in breach of the HOA, the Homeowners Association. So there are some situations where you might be limited, but for like single family homes and stuff, you're never going to, I don't think you'd ever deal with that. You can just run it as a rental and you're good to go. So there's definitely less restrictions on the traditional side, which is good. But you also, on the flip side, when you look at short-term rentals, you have less control over who your tenants are. Now, services like Airbnb, they do have, background check and things like that they will do on, on the tenants in order to try to ensure that they're going to, take care of your place. But it's much more limited than what you can do when dealing with traditional tenants. So, with the traditional tenants, you can absolutely do the full, criminal history check, credit check, background check, income verification, talk to references. Like there's all of this background stuff that you can do, and I would recommend that you do in order to ensure you got the right people in your unit. And by doing that, you're, kind of protecting yourself a little bit more from bad things happening to your unit. Whereas with the short-term rentals, you don't have as much control over who comes. So they might trash the unit, they might not. Now, once again, there are ways you can protect yourself against that using, required renter's insurance and things like that for the tenants that are there. But another conversation. So pros and cons, it depends. And last but not least, the point I wanted to bring up is that of time and management. Now, if you have a traditional rental, and especially if you have a lot of units, you're not going to want to be managing that yourself. That is just too much time and too much headache. So you can be completely 100% hands-off on your units with a good manager, right? With a traditional rental. That's awesome. But did you know that you can also be 100% hands-off with short-term rentals? So this last one's kind of like a trick because they're exactly the same. Both traditional rentals as well as short-term rentals, both of them can be handled entirely by a property manager. Now, usually they're different people, right? I wouldn't recommend somebody who says, "Oh yeah, I do short-term. I manage short-term properties and traditional properties." It's a different clientele with different needs, with different challenges. I would find somebody who's an expert at managing traditional rentals, have them help you with your traditionals. Find somebody who's an expert at managing short-term rentals and let them help you with that because they are very, very different from a management standpoint and all the nuances and everything, very, very different. But either way, you can absolutely do it without having to self-manage. If you want to do it yourself, the short-term rental is going to take more of your time than the traditional will, typically. Especially if it's busy, you're going to be a lot busier. And so as you're scaling your short-term rental business, you might want to focus on finding that right person that can help manage that for you so that you can have it be more passive income, unless, of course, you like doing it, in which case, go for it. So I hope that has been beneficial for you today in sharing some of the differences between short-term rentals, traditional rentals. I know at the beginning I mentioned which one is my favorite. My answer is both. Both, because they have it's diversification. They have different strong points, different pros, different cons. And the cool thing is, or what my recommendation would be, is when you are looking at a property, if we're acquiring a property to add to your portfolio, don't just look at it through one set of circumstances. Don't say, okay, does this work as a traditional? Does it work as a short term? Look at it through all the options. See, okay, can I run this as a traditional rental? Yes, it cash flows. Cool. Can I run it as a short-term rental? Is there enough demand? Is this in an area where that would actually work? Yes, cool. Run the cash flow analysis and see, does it work? If it does, awesome. The more options you have of how you can utilize that property, the better you're going to protect yourself against market changes, against unforeseen, surprises that can come up. And that is how you can create a more solid, stable, and scalable portfolio moving forward. Once again, my name is Ryan Black. Thanks for joining me on today's video. If you're interested in learning more about real estate investing, becoming either an active or passive investor, I invite you to reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you. Thanks for watching the video. Have a great day.